The underground car park beneath the sleek London skyscraper echoed with stillness, disturbed only by the low, confident purr of my Aston Martin DB12 AMR. Silver surface caught the faint light from the overhead fixtures, throwing reflections across the concrete walls like sharp whispers. I stepped out slowly, my heels clicking against the cold floor, deliberate and composed. Across the space, my parents, Charles and Eleanor Whitmore, stood frozen. They didn't speak. They didn't move. Their faces, usually unreadable, were pale now, rigid, as if some terrible truth had just revealed itself before them. 3 years. 3 years since they cut me off without a word, without looking back. And now, here they were, speechless before the daughter they believed they'd erased. Their silence wasn't power anymore. It was disbelief. Everything about this moment, the scent of leather and engine oil, the electric weight in the air, felt like a reckoning. I watched their eyes flick from the car to me, then back again. Not recognition. Not pride. Just shock. My name is Charlotte Evelyn Whitmore. I'm 29. And that evening, the brittle facade of our perfect family cracked, loud and irreversible. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. To understand why that moment felt like a symphony of triumph, you must first know what it means to grow up as the unwanted shadow in a family of gilded favorites. I wasn't just overlooked, I was never meant to exist. The fourth child, the afterthought. The mistake. My birth disrupted the symmetry of a perfectly curated trio. My parents already had everything they wanted: Henry, the crown prince, Oliver, the ambitious statesman in the making, and Isabella, the golden girl. I was merely excess, an inconvenient truth they dressed in old clothes and kept out of photographs. Contrast in our household wasn't subtle, it was a chasm. It showed in every corner of our lives, loud and sharp like the clink of fine china I was never allowed to touch. Henry wore suits from Savile Row, his fittings accompanied by fanfare and post-lunch teas. I wore his cast-offs, the fabric stiff with dry cleaning starch, still holding the shape of his broader shoulders. The sleeves always hung awkwardly past my hands, and I learned early to roll them up without complaint. That was the quiet expectation. Don't complain. Be grateful for the scraps. Oliver needed a laptop to begin university. A brand new MacBook Pro arrived the next day, silver and pristine, still sealed. When I asked for a graphing calculator for my advanced mathematics course, my mother reached into a drawer and handed me Oliver's old one. It had a cracked screen, 3 keys missing, and smelt vaguely of spilled coffee. "It still works," she said, not unkindly, but with a finality that killed the conversation. And so I made it work. I always did. That became my unspoken role, the child who asked for little and expected even less. But if the hand-me-down stung, what truly carved the hollow into my chest was the absence of acknowledgement. Not scorn, just silence. A quiet dismissal that said, "You don't matter." Henry made the university rugby team, and our Kensington townhouse turned into a festival ground. Caterers served lamb cutlets and champagne. The living room transformed into a shrine of his jersey and team photos. When Oliver was accepted into Oxford, my father threw a sprawling garden party, shaking hands and calling him a future leader of men. Isabella's watercolors were featured in a Chelsea gallery. My mother cried when the gallery owner praised her brushwork, and she called her "my little Monet" for weeks. They framed the local newspaper's review like it was a national treasure. And me? I got my A-level results in the mail. Straight A. I left them on the kitchen counter for someone to notice. No one did. I slipped into the background of their joy like wallpaper, useful only when silent. The milestones of my siblings were paraded and preserved, each one a public declaration of excellence. Mine dissolved into the air, unnoticed, like breath on a winter window. I was not the child they cheered for, not the daughter they toasted with flutes of Veuve Clicquot under the golden chandeliers. I learned to swallow the ache, to smile in the group photos where I stood a little too far to the side. I became fluent in invisibility, until one day I decided I would no longer ask to be seen. And me? 15, I won the National Mathematics Olympiad first place against thousands of the brightest students in the country. I remember gripping the gleaming silver trophy with both hands as I walked up the path to our house, my heart thudding with something fragile but loud: hope. I dared to think just for a moment that this would be the turning point, that this finally would be the thing they couldn't ignore. I imagined a small celebration, maybe a hug, perhaps even a framed photo beside Henry's rugby medals or Isabella's gallery pamphlet. Instead, I found my mother in the living room, carefully sorting through a tangle of satin and sequins, Isabella's dance costumes for her upcoming performance. She didn't look up. "That's nice, Charlotte," she murmured, folding a leotard. Then, still not meeting my eyes, "Can you help Isabella with her geometry homework?" No celebration. No call to extended family. No dinner in my honor, no photo on the mantle. Just a deflection. A redirection of the spotlight, as if any praise I might deserve should be rerouted toward Isabella's ever-shining orbit. I carried the trophy upstairs and sat alone in my room. The door clicked softly behind me. I placed the award on my desk and stared at the engraved plate for a long time: Charlotte Evelyn Whitmore, first place. And as the silence pressed in around me, I felt something sharp begin to fracture inside. The realization that I was invisible in my own family. Not disliked. Not misunderstood. Just unseen. By 16, I stopped waiting for recognition. I'd learned the rules of our household, and I understood that success would never be handed to me, not praise, not money, not attention. So I got a job. A tiny cafe on the corner of Portobello Road took me in on weekends. I swept floors, washed mugs, frothed cappuccinos, and memorized regulars' orders for £6 an hour. Every shift was a quiet act of rebellion. Every paycheck was a whispered promise to myself that I would not be dependent on people who refused to value me. With my first month's wages, I bought a smartphone. Not the newest release, not even a mid-range model. But it was mine, untouched, unshared, not a hand-me-down patched with duct tape or covered in Isabella's old stickers. I held it like a secret. At dinner one night, my father looked up from his wine and gestured toward me with his fork. "Look at Charlotte," he said with a smirk. "So independent." My mother nodded approvingly. "Isn't it wonderful? She's really learned to take care of herself." They said it like I was a well-trained dog, as if outsourcing their responsibilities had somehow become my greatest quality. Then came my final year of school. I watched Henry's effortless transition into postgraduate law at Cambridge, funded in full with a monthly allowance to cover housing and bespoke suits. Oliver had gone to Oxford with the same privileges, his bank account padded and his textbooks delivered weeks in advance. Isabella, predictably, had chosen to study art in Florence. My mother wept when she left, and her tuition, plus a rented flat overlooking the Arno, was covered without hesitation. So when my parents asked to have a word one evening after dinner, I knew what was coming. We sat in the drawing room, leather armchairs, fire crackling, as if the setting might soften what was about to be said. My father began. "Charlotte, darling," he said, his voice smooth and practiced, "we've put 3 children through university. We simply can't afford another." I said nothing. "Not yet." My mother chimed in, her tone falsely bright. "But you've always been so clever, so capable. You'll figure it out." There it was again, the illusion of empowerment. The way they dressed their neglect in compliments. as if telling me I was resourceful made it acceptable to abandon me. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded. Then I went upstairs, sat on my bed, and opened the file on my laptop that detailed every penny I had saved. It wasn't enough. Not even close. That night, I called my father's older sister, Aunt Beatrice. She had always been different. A sharp, elegant woman who'd carved her own career in marketing and never married. She lived in Marylebone in a glass and brick flat filled with contemporary art and espresso machines that whirred like jet engines. She sent me postcards from Seoul, Dubai, New York, never with long messages, just a line or two in her spidery handwriting. Think bigger. You're not like them. When she answered the phone, her voice was brisk but not unkind. I didn't embellish. I told her the truth, that I'd been accepted to the London School of Economics with a 70% scholarship, but my parents refused to cover the remaining costs. That I had part-time work, some savings, but no way to bridge the gap. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a pause. Then she said, "Charlotte, I've watched your parents treat you like a footnote your entire life. You've never once asked for anything." My throat tightened. "I'll cover the rest," she said. "Tuition, housing, whatever you need. Don't worry about repayment yet. Focus on getting out. Getting up. You've already done more with less than any of them." I sat there, stunned. Not because of the offer, but because someone in my family for the first time had seen me as worthy. Worthy of investment, of care, of belief. That moment became a quiet cornerstone of who I was becoming. Not the abandoned child. Not the background noise in someone else's celebration. But a young woman who would rise anyway because someone had finally whispered, "You deserve better." And I believed her. Ecstatic, I bounded down the stairs, heart pounding with the weight of the call I'd just finished. Aunt Beatrice's words still echoed in my ears, "I'll cover the rest." Felt unreal, like some long-denied dream was finally unfolding in front of me. I wanted to share it. Just this once, I wanted to be the one with news worth hearing. But the scene that greeted me in the sitting room stopped me cold. My parents were toasting Henry's graduation from Cambridge, flutes of champagne raised, their smiles stretched wide beneath the chandelier's glow. Outside the window, a brand new BMW 3 Series gleamed in the driveway, a bright red bow draped across the hood like a prize ribbon. Henry stood beside it, posing for photos, soaking in the applause. "You've earned this, son," my father said, his voice proud and full, a rare warmth lighting his face. Camera clicked again and again, capturing the moment from every angle. I lingered at the doorway, the edges of my smile tight. My scholarship news burned silently in my chest, unspoken and unnoticed. But still I tried. "Henry," I said, forcing cheer into my voice, "since you've got a new car, could I maybe have your old one for uni?" He turned, mid-laugh, and looked at me as if I'd said something absurd. Then came the chuckle, short, sharp, dismissive. "Are you joking? I'm selling it for my flat deposit. Take the tube like everyone else." My mother didn't even blink. Public transport builds character, Charlotte. And that was that. No questions, no consideration, just another clean dismissal. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the ache more bitter than usual. They had just spent £30,000 on Henry's car, the same parents who told me they couldn't afford another university tuition, who praised my independence while offering nothing. The message wasn't buried. It was loud and clear. I was not worth their investment. University was exhausting, but it gave me purpose. I commuted 2 hours a day by tube, rain or shine, crowded or delayed. I balanced my LSE coursework with early morning and late evening shifts at a cafe in Bloomsbury. The manager, Arthur, was in his 60s, with graying hair and a permanent frown that hid surprising kindness. "You're going somewhere, Charlotte," he'd grumble, sliding me an extra muffin when he thought I looked tired. He let me study behind the counter during slow hours, often watching me with quiet respect as I reviewed investment finance flashcards between cappuccino orders. While my classmates partied and took weekend trips abroad, I spent my nights hunched over spreadsheets and textbooks. My hunger for success left no room for distraction. I didn't need the normal university experience. I needed to win. I needed to prove that I could rise without anyone's help. Back at home, the atmosphere grew colder, more brittle with each passing month. Henry married in a grand ceremony at a countryside estate in the Cotswolds, white roses, fireworks, a designer gown for his bride, all paid for, of course. Oliver moved into a stylish flat in Shoreditch, fully furnished by Charles and Eleanor. Isabella left for Paris, her expenses quietly absorbed as if it were obvious she'd need them. Even with their adult lives pulling them in different directions, my siblings returned like clockwork for family events. Sunday roasts, Christmas dinners, birthday parties. My parents greeted them like celebrities. "Our favorites are here," they gush. I sat at the far end of the table, half buried in textbooks, invisible in plain sight. When I graduated from LSE with first-class honors and a job offer from Goldman Sachs, my parents clapped politely at the ceremony, nothing more. No hugs, no proud tears, no celebration dinner. Just the restrained applause of people watching a stranger reach a milestone that had nothing to do with them. 2 weeks later, they called me into the sitting room. "Charlotte, you're 22 now," my father began, voice clipped and businesslike. "It's time you found your own place." I stared at him, stunned. "Henry lived here until 24, I said quietly. "Oliver until 23. Isabella until last year." My mother didn't flinch. "You've always been so self-sufficient, darling." There it was again, that polished cruelty masquerading as praise. "You don't need us. We never needed you." They gave me 3 weeks to move out. I found a studio flat in Brixton, cramped, drafty, with flaking paint and noisy neighbors. I moved alone, dragging suitcases up narrow stairs, my parents offering neither help nor a forwarding address. No housewarming gift, and no calls to check if I'd settled. Just silence. And then silence became absence. That year, Christmas came and went without an invitation. So did Easter. My birthday. Family photos filled Instagram like salt in a wound, my siblings laughing in the garden with flutes of champagne, my parents beaming. My absence wasn't mentioned. Didn't have to be. The message was clear. I had been edited out. The first Christmas alone, I sat on the floor of my flat eating takeaway curry, fairy lights blinking weakly overhead. I scrolled through their posts with a dull ache in my chest. There was Henry carving turkey, Oliver handing out gifts, Isabella opening something wrapped in gold foil. My place at the table was gone, and no one noticed. The following year, I did something reckless. I decided to crash their Christmas dinner. I spent the morning baking tiramisu from scratch, my hands shaking slightly as I dusted the top with cocoa. I dressed carefully. Not to impress, but to steel myself. I showed up at the front door just after 5. The house looked exactly the same, warm lights glowing from every window, laughter floating through the cracks. When the door opened, the room beyond froze. Henry stood with his wife, Sophie, one arm around her waist. Oliver, beside his partner Clara, paused mid-laugh. Isabella, elegant as ever, sipped wine with her fiancé, Lucas. My parents sat at the head of the long dining table, silverware gleaming, a roast at the center like something out of a glossy magazine. "Charlotte," my mother said slowly, "we weren't expecting you." I held up the dessert. "I brought tiramisu." My father's smile barely touched his eyes. "How thoughtful." I took a seat at the far end. Dinner was exquisite and excruciating. They spoke in polished anecdotes and overlapping praise. Henry's promotion, Oliver's PhD, Isabella's upcoming exhibition in Paris. Each story floated above me like balloons I wasn't allowed to touch. I offered quiet congratulations, but no one asked about me. When Isabella finally turned, her tone was syrupy. "Still in that tiny flat, Charlotte?" I nodded, too tired to deflect. Oliver added with a smirk, "Still taking the tube everywhere?" Henry chuckled, and no one intervened. Not even my parents. Their silence was permission. I left early. Tiramisu remained untouched on the sideboard. That was the last time I showed up uninvited. For 3 years, we didn't speak. I threw myself into Goldman Sachs like a woman possessed, late nights, early mornings, deals that bled into weekends. Promotions came swiftly, not because of favoritism, but because I refused to be anything less than exceptional. I paid Beatrice back every penny she'd lent me with interest. And when the wire cleared, I sent her a bouquet of white orchids and a handwritten note that simply read, "You were right to believe in me." I bought the Aston Martin, a gleaming silver DB12 AMR, not for show but as a statement, I'm no one's castaway anymore. Then came the penthouse in Canary Wharf, its wraparound glass framing the Thames like a living painting. I traveled to Florence for the food, to Barcelona for the freedom. I smiled again, even laughed, but always carried the quiet ache of abandonment. Then one Thursday my phone rang. I stared at the screen. Eleanor Whitmore. My mother's name. My thumb hovered. I answered. "Charlotte," she said. "No hello, no how are you?" Her voice was clipped, rehearsed. "Your great-aunt Margaret is visiting from Edinburgh. She wants the whole family at dinner Saturday, 6 p.m. Be there." I blinked. Margaret. I remembered birthday cards in looping cursive, the faint scent of lavender. But I couldn't place her face. "I'm busy," I began, already reaching for a polite excuse. "This isn't optional, Charlotte," she snapped. "Don't embarrass us." Then click. She hung up. For a moment, I sat motionless. I could have ignored her. I should have. But something in me stirred, a spark, an old wound itching to be witnessed. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about revelation. I wanted them to see what they threw away. Saturday arrived with cool London skies. I chose my outfit with care. A tailored navy Chanel dress, elegant and sharp, and a diamond necklace that shimmered only if you looked twice. Class, not flash. I parked the Aston Martin in a nearby garage and walked the last 2 blocks to their Kensington townhouse. A small power move, but intentional. The door opened, and my father stood there, older than I remembered, but still wearing that politician's smile. "Charlotte," he said. "You came." The dining room was frozen in time, mahogany table polished to a fault, silverware placed with militant precision. Great-aunt Margaret sat at the head, silver hair in a neat chignon, posture regal. Beside her were the usual suspects, Henry and Sophie, Oliver and Clara, Isabella and Lucas. Chatter dimmed as I entered, every eye turning toward me. "Look who's here," my mother chirped with a bright falseness, as if I were a forgotten second cousin. Margaret leaned forward, squinting. "Charlotte? My, you've grown into quite the lady." I smiled. "Lovely to see you, Aunt Margaret." Dinner unfolded like a stage play. Henry's new position at Deloitte. Oliver's PhD thesis on something no one understood. Isabella's art gallery feature in Paris, très chic, cooed my mother. They beamed with pride, and when it was my turn, the tone shifted. "Charlotte," Isabella said sweetly, "such a simple dress." "Very practical." Oliver leaned back, wine swirling. "Still taking the tube everywhere?" Henry chuckled. "Remember when you begged to borrow my car for job interviews? That little Fiat?" Laughter followed. My parents smiled, silent allies. I said nothing. I let their barbs hang in the air like damp laundry. Then Margaret, quiet until now, looked at me with those sharp eyes. "Charlotte, what do you do, dear?" The room froze. I'm an investment manager at Goldman Sachs, I said evenly. The silence was delicious. My father's jaw clenched. My mother's wine glass paused mid-air. Isabella's fork scraped her plate. Oliver stopped smirking. Margaret brightened. Goldman Sachs? Oh, that's remarkable, dear. You must be doing very well for yourself. I nodded. I manage, but nothing more. Let them wonder what manage really meant. From that moment, the table changed. The jabs stopped. My siblings glanced sideways, recalibrating. My parents' smiles dimmed, the mask slipping. They didn't know this version of me, and that terrified them. After dessert, some overdone panna cotta, I stood. Margaret, it's been lovely, but I have an early meeting. She reached out, clasped my hand with surprising strength. You must come visit me in Edinburgh, dear. We'll talk properly away from this circus. I smiled. I'd like that. My family scrambled to maintain their facade. We'll walk you out, my father said, already at my side. I let them see me in motion, heels clicking on stone, coat draped over one arm, as composed and untouchable as I'd always dreamed. As I turned the corner and disappeared into the street, I didn't look back. I had nothing left to say. No apology I needed to hear, no invitation I would have accepted. My footsteps felt lighter than ever. That parking lot had been the stage for a moment I didn't realize I'd waited my whole life to claim, not out of spite, but clarity. For so long, I'd imagined some version of this confrontation. Sometimes I dreamed of them apologizing in tears. Other times I saw myself screaming, demanding answers. But in the end, all I gave them was the truth, and all I felt was peace. I had finally stopped asking why they didn't love me the way they loved the others. That question had haunted me since childhood. I remembered every award I brought home that went unnoticed, every moment of quiet pride that passed without a whisper of recognition. When Henry scraped by with average grades, there was a cake and balloons. When Isabella landed a gallery internship, champagne corks flew. And when I signed my first deal as a private equity partner, silence. At some point, I stopped trying to outshine them. I just outgrew them. That night, as I sipped wine alone on my penthouse balcony, London glittering below me like a jeweled quilt, I allowed myself a strange kind of mourning. Not for the family I had, but for the one I'd always wished they were. People romanticize the idea of blood. But blood alone is meaningless without love, without loyalty. My parents like to say they raised independent children, but the truth is, they abandoned the one who didn't need rescuing. And now that I no longer needed anything from them, not approval, not inclusion, not validation, they came crawling. The next few weeks were full of messages wrapped in faux warmth. Birthday wishes with strings attached. Henry emailed me his honeymoon fund. Isabella sent links to designer wedding gowns, asking for my opinion. My mother forwarded a family group chat invite. They weren't subtle. I didn't answer. Instead, I focused on what I was building, a life rooted in truth, resilience, and hard-earned self-worth. My days began with quiet rituals, coffee brewed in a sunlit kitchen, a workout facing the river, fresh flowers I picked out myself. My calendar filled with purpose, strategy meetings, investor calls, architecture fundraisers, solo vacations to places my family never knew I dreamed of. I hosted dinner parties with people who asked about me, not just what I could do for them. Sometimes, in those soft moments just before sleep, I wondered if I was being too harsh. Was it petty to ignore my mother's texts? Was it cruel to delete Henry's voicemail without listening? But then I remembered the girl who ate curry alone on Christmas. The one who worked 2 jobs while her siblings borrowed the family car. The one who cried in the bathroom at age 16 because her parents forgot her piano recital. That girl had no one, and she deserved better than recycled affection offered too late. I don't hate my family, but I've accepted them for who they are, performers in a play where I was never cast in a lead role. Now I've written my own script, one where I rise not because of their applause, but in spite of its absence. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing, 'cause thriving isn't about revenge. It's about creating a life so rich, so full that the silence behind you no longer matters. And I've never been more full. Looking back, I've learned a few things the hard way, lessons I now carry like armor. First, you don't need your family's approval to become someone remarkable. I spent years chasing it, only to realize the only validation I ever needed was my own. Second, blood doesn't equal loyalty. Just because they're family doesn't mean they have your best interests at heart. Real love is shown in actions, not empty titles. Third, silence can be more painful than cruelty. Being ignored, overlooked, it taught me that indifference leaves deeper scars than words ever could. Fourth, revenge doesn't have to be loud. Success, peace, and freedom are the sweetest payback. Let them watch you rise quietly, beautifully, without them. And fifth, you get to choose your family. Surround yourself with people who see your light and never ask you to dim it. If any part of my story hit home for you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Somewhere out there, another woman is questioning her worth, and maybe this will help her remember it.